I was on my way home from a late night party, and I decided to take a shortcut through a quiet, wooded area. It was pitch black outside, and the only light came from the moon and stars above. As I walked, I heard the sound of twigs snapping underfoot, and I turned around to see if anyone was following me. I couldn't see anyone, so I kept walking. But the sounds grew louder, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Suddenly, a hand reached out from the darkness and grabbed me by the arm. I screamed and tried to pull away, but the grip was too strong. "Relax," a voice whispered in my ear. "I'm not going to hurt you." I turned around to see a man, dressed in all black, standing in front of me. He was tall and muscular, with a menacing look on his face. I tried to run, but he grabbed me again and pulled me back. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, a hint of anger in his voice. I was terrified, but I managed to keep my composure. "I'm just trying to get home," I said, my voice shaking. The man looked at me for a long moment, his eyes piercing. Finally, he let go of me and stepped back into the shadows. "Be careful out here," he said, before disappearing into the night. I didn't know what to make of the encounter, but I knew I needed to get out of there as quickly as possible. I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. When I finally made it home, I locked the doors and windows and collapsed onto my bed, exhausted but grateful to be alive. To this day, I still don't know who that man was or what he wanted from me. But I do know one thing: I'll never take that shortcut again. I was driving home late one night, taking the back roads to avoid the highway traffic. It was a clear night, but there were no streetlights, and the darkness felt suffocating. As I drove, I saw a figure on the side of the road, waving their arms frantically. I slowed down and rolled down my window, asking if they needed help. But as they got closer, I could see their face was twisted into a grotesque grin. Their eyes were black, and their teeth were sharp and jagged. I knew then that I had made a terrible mistake. I tried to speed away, but the figure chased after me, their arms reaching out to grab me. I hit the gas and swerved through the narrow roads, trying to lose them. But they were always there, just out of reach. I drove for what felt like hours, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, I saw the faint glow of streetlights in the distance. I sped towards them, hoping that they would be a safe haven. As I pulled into the parking lot of a gas station, I saw the figure slowly retreat into the shadows. I let out a sigh of relief, knowing that I had escaped with my life. As I walked into the gas station, I saw the attendant staring at me with a look of disbelief. "What happened to you?" she asked, her eyes wide. I tried to explain, but my words felt jumbled and incoherent. I knew that no one would believe me, that they would think I was crazy. But I knew what I had seen, and I knew that I had narrowly escaped something truly terrifying. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. But I knew that I had survived, and I would never forget that terrifying night on the back roads. I was on a road trip with some friends, driving through the remote countryside. We were in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but fields and forests for miles around. The sun was setting, and the sky was a fiery orange. As we drove, we noticed a figure on the side of the road. It was a woman, dressed in a white gown. She looked distressed, and we decided to stop and see if she needed help. We rolled down the window and asked if she was okay. She didn't say anything, but instead climbed into the back seat of our car. We assumed she was in shock and didn't want to leave her on the side of the road. As we drove, we tried to talk to her, but she remained silent. We became increasingly uneasy as we noticed strange markings on her arms and legs, almost like ritualistic scars. Suddenly, she began to laugh, a deep, unsettling sound that made the hairs on the back of our necks stand up. We asked her to get out of the car, but she refused. We decided to pull over and try to remove her from the car. As soon as we stopped, she bolted out of the car and disappeared into the darkness. We were terrified and quickly got back in the car and locked the doors. That's when we heard the chanting. It was coming from the surrounding forest, and it was getting closer. We tried to start the car, but it wouldn't start. The chanting grew louder and louder, and we could see shadowy figures emerging from the woods. We were surrounded, with nowhere to run. Suddenly, the car started, and we sped away from the chanting and the shadows. We made it back to civilization, shaken but alive. To this day, we don't know who or what that woman was, but we all know we were lucky to have made it out alive. I was on a road trip with my friends, driving through the desolate countryside. We were in the middle of nowhere, with no gas stations or rest stops for miles. As we drove, we spotted a hitchhiker on the side of the road. He was an older man with a gruff appearance, and he looked like he had been waiting there for a while. Feeling sympathetic, we decided to pick him up. He climbed into the back seat, and we continued on our journey. The man was friendly enough, making small talk with us and telling us stories about his life. But as the night wore on, his demeanor began to change. He grew increasingly agitated, his voice becoming hoarse and his eyes darting around the car. We asked him if he was okay, but he just muttered something unintelligible under his breath. We started to feel uneasy, and my friend driving the car suggested we drop him off at the next town. But as we approached the next town, the hitchhiker began to scream and thrash around in the back seat. He was clawing at the windows, trying to break free. We pulled over, terrified and unsure of what to do. That's when the man lunged at us, his hands outstretched and his eyes glowing in the dark. We managed to push him back and lock the doors, but he kept trying to break in. We were trapped, with no escape in sight. After what felt like an eternity, we heard the sound of police sirens in the distance. The hitchhiker finally gave up and fled into the night. When the police arrived, they told us that the man we had picked up was a notorious serial killer who had been on the loose for years. We were lucky to have made it out alive. But the memory of that terrifying encounter will haunt me for the rest of my life. I was driving down a lonely road in the middle of nowhere, the only sound coming from my car's engine. It was a shortcut I had taken a few times before, but this time something was different. The air was thick with an eerie silence, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I rounded a bend, I saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. It was a man, dressed in ragged clothes and staring straight at me with piercing eyes. I slowed down, unsure of what to do. The man didn't move, and I realized he was standing in front of my car. I tried to swerve around him, but he seemed to anticipate my every move. No matter which way I turned, he was always in front of me. I was starting to panic when I heard a voice in my head, a voice that wasn't my own. It said, "Don't stop. Keep going." I trusted my instincts and hit the gas, speeding away from the man. But he was relentless, chasing after me on foot. I could see him in my rearview mirror, his eyes burning into mine. Finally, I reached a small town and pulled into a gas station. The man was nowhere to be seen. I got out of my car, shaking and sweating, and approached the attendant. He asked me what was wrong, and I told him what had happened. The attendant's face grew pale, and he told me a story about a man who had died on that road years ago. His ghost was said to haunt the area, appearing to drivers and causing accidents. The attendant warned me to never take that road again. I shuddered at the thought of what could have happened if I had stopped. The voice in my head had saved my life, and I vowed never to ignore my instincts again. As I drove away, I could feel the ghost's eyes on me, but I knew I had survived to tell the tale.